Let me start by saying good evening again to each of you. I want to echo what you just heard. I'm not sure how many of you were with us a few minutes ago, but directly across, what we say across the street, Madam Speaker, across the street, we just opened up a neighborhood community action center right here. This is our way of bringing City Hall to neighborhoods. And we couldn't be more grateful to Pastor Lonnie Herndon, First Lady Kim Herndon, and Pastor Terry for making sure that the doors of Christian compassion and community of compassion are always open when we need them. There's some folks I want to recognize who are present on today, and I want to start with Philadelphia's own. And I said this earlier, and I didn't tell you earlier, but we were talking about you earlier. I want you to give a huge round of applause to our trailblazing first woman Speaker of the Pennsylvania House, who's our Philadelphia State Rep. And, Madam Speaker, 102 matters, the majority matters. Thank you for saving the majority. We appreciate you and grateful. Thank you. We also have with us State Representative Rick Krajewski, Council Member Jamie Gaultier. We also have Ron Waters, Greg Benjamin, Pete Wilson, who are here, leaders in our area. Thank you so very much for your presence. Also, something that I'm about to talk about a great deal, and I'm happy that he's actually in the room with us, Ryan Boyer, head of the Philadelphia Building Trades. Thank you, Ryan Boyer, for being here. I also saw some of my friends from 32 BJ here on today, so thank you all so very much. Let me tell you how we get here. As mayor of the city of Philadelphia, after much research and consideration, there came a time when I needed to make a decision about this issue relative to the Sixers and a potential arena on Market Street that there had been much discussion about over the past few years. There have been countless community meetings, a great deal of research done. And I am super proud of the folks that I refer to as my subject matter experts for the Parker administration and the work that they did that would eventually inform my decision making as it related to the arena. I said when I announced my support for the arena that one, after I made the announcement, that would not be it. That I would do what I have always done my entire career. Make sure that I have shared my decision making and the rationale behind it with every constituency I represent. So we will be hosting community meetings like this one in neighborhoods across the city, so that as mayor of the city of Philadelphia, I get a chance to communicate directly with residents, particularly in those areas where we are hosting those meetings, and others who for scheduling purposes, attending one particular meeting over another could be what is best for them. So what I'm going to do now is to walk through some guiding principles with you. So you needed to know for your benefit so that you can be ambassadors and share what guided my decision making. And I want to walk over the agreement highlights, and we're going to go through city's expenditures because it's important to me. Madam Speaker, when we were at the previous announcement, you talked about a 40% poverty rate. You talked about the need for opportunity, and that played a significant role in my decision making. When I decided that we were getting prepared for this decision making, we had what I would refer to as my rubric. This is what would determine my decision. And the first one was the careful stewardship of city resources, and the focus on the city's fiscal stability. Above all, that will always be number one, because if the city of Philadelphia is not on sound fiscal ground, so many of the challenges that we need to address, it would not be possible. The next was maximizing the potential citywide impact of such a large-scale development. Citywide impact. Next was unlocking the long overdue redevelopment of Market East that is trying to attract investment, generating jobs, yielding new tax revenue, and creating vibrancy on a historic and critical commercial corridor in the city. Now this is where it gets a tad bit nostalgic for me. How many of you remember a Market Street when J.C. Penney was on the corner of 11th and Market? Anybody remembers that? How many people in this room remember John Wanamaker's? Strawbridges? So who said Gimbals? Lit? Who went to the sound of Market music to get you? All right, y'all reeled in. Okay. Listen. When you hear me talk about bringing long overdue redevelopment, it's about me as a lifelong Philadelphian reflecting on what Market Street represented for us. The Market Street that we have today is not the Market Street of old. Cherelle, how do you know? I went to high school at 1118 Market Street, to the Parkway Program High School. Traveling as a little girl, and I always share this, I'm going to post that picture so people see it's a real picture, in my best corduroy suit, the vest and the pants, long sleeve shirt. My grandmother would get me dressed to stand in the line, if you would remember, that would actually wrap around, go down the street and around the corner. What was everyone waiting to do? Take the picture with Santa Claus. Afterwards, if it was a good day, now you probably don't remember this, we could walk down to Woolworths and get a hot dog. Yeah. You remember Woolworths? Yeah. Why do I share this history with you? Because sometimes we forget when quality was a part of the norm for what we saw on what is our first commercial corridor in the city of Philadelphia. There are some who would have you believe that we should stay focused on where we are, and that this $1.3 billion private sector investment is something that we should not embrace. But I'm about to go through some numbers with you and share with you from a budgetary perspective why. But I also need you to know that in Philadelphia, if we're going to be a first-class city, we deserve to have high-quality amenities in our city on Market Street so that we can access them. Next, preserving and enhancing Chinatown. Listen. Including by responding to long-standing challenges that have developed in Chinatown over decades. Now this one, I'm a tad bit personal about, and I need to share with each of you why this becomes extremely important to me. And I want you to know, you're going to hear from the subject matter experts. We've published online all of the academic research that has been produced about this potential arena site. But this is why I'm personally so committed to ensuring that our Chinatown, the best Chinatown in the nation for its cultural authenticity, this is why I'm committed to ensuring that it thrives. Many of the people sitting here in this room grew up in a neighborhood like the one I grew up in. I grew up uptown, 19th and Cheltenham. My grandparents got there after they moved here from the South, Manning, South Carolina, and Accomack County, Virginia. They met and married and lived in a place called Richard Allen Homes. Some of you may not have ever heard of that before. But when it was first built, Richard Allen was a home that was for returning veterans. My grandfather was a Navy veteran. When my single teenage mother got pregnant with me, the family likes to say they moved on uptown, like the Jeffersons. And for the first time, my grandparents owned a home. My neighborhood was once Jewish, Italian, and Irish. And this is how you could know. When we moved into the community, we had a great deal of Catholic churches and Catholic schools and synagogues. That's how you know when a community has transitioned. You look at the historical and spiritual and faith-based institutions that are there. Then, we had corner stores in our neighborhoods. Now let me tell you something about these corner stores. These people, when I grew up, and I was born in 1972, I'll never tell you that secret ever again. 1972, I'm about to shock you. The neighborhood corner stores in my community, guess who owned them? The people who lived in the neighborhood owned the retail establishments in the neighborhood. I don't care if it was the sandwich shop, I don't care if it was the corner store where we went and got penny candy or we played video games. They owned the store and they lived over top of the stores. And if they didn't live there, they rented it to a family member or somebody. But imagine the nerve of a group of people living in a community owning the retail. And imagine the nerve of them to think that they had a nerve to build generational wealth in the community in which they were the residents. They did. And then all of a sudden, like a thief in the night, the 1980s and the 1990s came. And this thing called crack cocaine swept through my neighborhood. And it seemed like every bit of pride and dignity that was there, all of a sudden, those corner stores that were once owned by the people who lived there, those sandwich shops, all of the people who owned, and it was like a blink of an eye. 80s and the 90s, and then you opened up your eyes, and the people who lived in my community, they were relegated to being consumers. That means it was a lot of wealth in the neighborhood because the retail establishments and the commerce was still taking place. There was only one thing that changed. The people who lived there didn't own it. When you hear me talk about Chinatown and my commitment to ensuring that Chinatown not only survives, that it thrives, I want you to feel good about knowing that the reason why I can be so committed to Chinatown is because of the real life lived experience and transformation and loss of wealth and economic opportunity that I saw wiped out of the community that I grew up in. And guess what? You can't be the mayor of any city, and particularly this one, and not be willing to fight and use every tool that you possibly can to ensure that what you experience in your neighborhood, it doesn't happen anywhere else. And you want me to tell you what was really sad about it now that I think about it? I know what the electeds tried to do. I don't know if you know where Ogontz Avenue is. Ogontz Avenue, it had turned really, really bad. And we needed economic anchors in the neighborhood. I don't know if you know that there's a PennDOT driver's license servicing center at Middleton and Ogontz Avenue. Right down the street from there, there is a LCB wine and spirit store. I know you all don't think that those two state institutions just happen to choose Ogontz Avenue and that location in particular because they thought it was a good place to be in Philadelphia. They did it after lots of advocacy, because we knew in order for that commercial corridor to thrive, we needed an anchor. If we had these two institutions there, you can ensure a certain amount of foot traffic would be there. More people would come. And if they came in, maybe they would stop at the store across the street and get a soda or buy a pack of gum or find a way to purchase something else in the community so we could bring life back to that commercial corridor. And I know they're closed now, but that's how Relish survived for so many years. Another establishment is there now, but nothing would ever work there until we had economic anchors that were there. Another reason why this is important to me, and whomever is working the deck now, the team's going to be extremely upset, but I need to go to the slide that shows revenue here in the city of Philadelphia. The slide that shows revenue. This is important for me to share with you because this is not simply about emotion. This is not about emotion. These numbers don't lie. Our finance director, Rob DeBoe, is here. Our budget director, Sabrina Maynard, is here with us today. I want you to just be real clear about these numbers. This is the FY25 tax revenues, $5 billion in tax revenues for FY25 that supported our $6.37 billion One Philly budget that we passed along with Council President Kenyatta Johnson and members of City Council. But it's important that you see where the money that keeps our city running, I need you to see where this money comes from. Revenue from business taxes, that's wage, PICA city account, and BERT, is over $3.3 billion and makes up 67% of the total revenue that we use here in the city of Philadelphia to address the challenges that I know we all share that we want to address. We want to reduce gun violence. We want to support public education. I'm committed to 30,000 units of housing here in the city of Philadelphia. But guess what I understand? It's just not going to arrive here. We have to find a way to grow the economic pie and put people on a path to self-sufficiency. When you look at these numbers and see wage and net profits, 40%, BERT here, 12%, with real estate, PICA, real estate transfer taxes. I'm real personal about this one because everybody blows it up and they don't know it really represents a very small part of our revenues, but I'm going to affirm it. The beverage tax only represents 1%. Our $3.3 billion of this revenue, it comes from business taxes. So anybody who is easy, let me tell you, to stand up and talk about big bad business, big bad corporations, guess what? The people gave me an opportunity to serve them. That means that as mayor, I would have to make some tough decisions that wouldn't get me a round of applause. You think as mayor I'm not a human being? I would love it if everybody agreed with every decision that I made. Actually, I've seen a whole lot of people make politically expedient decisions, thinking, well, this would be easier for me. More people, you know, in politics, the goal is to win friends and influence people. Who wants to make a bad decision? Or make a decision that somebody doesn't like? You don't want that kind of decision making. But when I look at numbers like this, and I think about where the revenue is coming from that is keeping our city alive, and I made a commitment to make Philadelphia safer, cleaner, and greener with access to economic opportunity for all, the first thing that I have to ask myself is, well, where are you going to get the money from? I'm at war with the status quo. I want things to change. I want people in neighborhoods getting access to an opportunity for a living wage, healthcare, retirement security. Why am I so passionate about that? And that's not a line for me, just so you know, because when people don't know you, they make up a whole lot of things, like you've been on the track to be mayor for a long time. I grew up with a grandmother and grandfather who received public assistance from me. I know food stamps, not the credit cards. I know colored money in books, purple 20s, green 10s, and brown dollars. I know 5-pound blocks of cheese and pounds of butter. Listen, that even as a child, I didn't want to need it. I didn't want to have it. I remember being in line in the supermarket, and I had the money in books. I hated having to take that money, but that's what my grandmother gave me. If we weren't at shopping, it was before she went shopping and we needed to run and get something during the week. I remember seeing people behind me that had real money and letting them go before me. Oh, go ahead, I have to run and get something. Because I knew as a child that there was a difference with earning, having an opportunity to earn, and have dignity and pride in knowing that you are taking care of yourself. I say that to you, and this was important for me to share. The experts are going to come up. They're going to walk through some of the specifics with you, but I needed you to hear unfiltered from me as your mayor. I'm unapologetic about my decision. It's tough. We introduced the legislation under the leadership of Council President Kenyatta Johnson, Council Member Mark Squillers, the council member for that area, and they're working with all members of council. And I want you to know, and we're going to hear about what's in the agreement, but I want you to know they're asking very, very good questions. I serve as a member of the City Council. Madam Speaker, I have to remind people, I don't just know what it's like to be one of 17. I know what it's like to be one of 203. And I've been in the minority and the majority. So I know what it's like to work with Democrats and Republicans, and I know what it's like to come home and have the honor and the privilege of serving as council. And if there's one thing I'm committed to, because I have 4 years to do it, I am going to make good on my commitment to the people of this city by giving them a government that they can see, touch, and feel. People don't trust government today. They heard a lot of good speeches. They haven't seen it at work in their lives enough in a way that makes it meaningful to them. That's what 2-day-a-week trash pickup is like. That's what people cleaning commercial quarters is about. That's what the City College for Municipal Employment is about, so that we can hire people from neighborhoods. That's what year-round, extended day, extended year programming is about. So young people who may not have access to the academic enrichment programs that some have the ability to pay for, or is offered in their schools on a regular basis, that's why this becomes so very important. So I wanted you to hear it unfiltered from me. This next piece here is the piece that some folks have left out of this conversation. And that is ensuring that city residents and business groups that have been historically excluded from participation have access to employment and those contracting opportunities. That is extremely important. They're going to go through the details of it, but this is the high-level snapshot. What does it do? Yes, it keeps the Philadelphia 76ers at home playing in Philadelphia, but for me, if you're ever describing what it means to your mayor, I want you to know that for your mayor, this is about everything beyond the basketball. This is about beyond the basketball for me. $1.3 billion project with no city funds, an approach that is unprecedented among our local sports facilities. It has never happened before in the city of Philadelphia. And I don't care if you're for it or against it, but we have to acknowledge the fact that this has never occurred with any of our sports teams before. So we need to acknowledge that for the record. In addition, we must affirm that over 1,000 construction and operations, because people have been talking about the construction jobs, and I know Ryan Boyer is here on the day, but we're talking about what happens when the arena is built and it is fully operational. Are those jobs good jobs at CIU? Are those jobs good jobs? That is what we are focused on. Have you looked at the people ever who run the concessions? Why not focus on local firms? Why not focus on vendors and owners who traditionally haven't had an opportunity to participate in the economy on this way? How do we know it's a good idea? Well, when you're like me, you do your homework. So I, along with my team, we traveled, met with, talked with people who have arenas in towns across the country. One in particular, I said, what's that? It looked like a mobile cart. You know how we have our street vendors who sell hot dogs and pretzels? Well, aside from the traditional vendors that you see, the concessions, they had these mobile carts. And vendors actually come and sell merchandise there. This is how they test out whether or not a local vendor, a neighborhood vendor, who, if it were me, just think of somebody who makes the best sweet potato pies in the world. Well, maybe they make good sweet potato pies, but they don't have a brick and mortar store. But they do have a good product. What does the arena have? The arena has a commercial kitchen. We need to make sure they have all the licenses and the insurance that's needed to make sure that they, from a liability perspective, they're protected. But they have a place now to go sell the product to see whether or not there's a market for it. And just one day, just maybe they could be one of the actual concessionaires that are there. Those are opportunities that we cannot act like don't exist in this proposal. This is paired with what you're going to hear people talk about. That's our Historic Economic Opportunity Plan. It's the EOP. That's for ensuring employment and those contracting opportunities. And that is to benefit the entire city. Next is the CBA. Now, I've had so many people say, why did the city of Philadelphia have the CBA? Why is it with the city and not a community-based organization? I'm glad you asked. After traveling and hearing the horror stories about what happened to a grassroots community organization in another city that I won't name because I thank them for sharing their testimony, they negotiated very expensive CBA with the community. The team moved there. They opened up. Guess what happened? They sold the team. And when they sold the team, guess what the new owner said? That community, that CBA, that's not with our firm. That was with those people. And they are no longer the owners. Soon as we got back, I called our city solicitor, Renee Garcia, Tiffany Thurman, my chief of staff, and I said, guess what? The city will always have a law department. I don't care who the mayor is. And if this team would ever be sold and they try to renege on their agreements, we have a law department that has the ability to fight. So when people have asked for the why, know that we've done our homework and we've seen what these best practices are like. And the goal is to make sure that we could enforce the deal. The next thing I want to be clear about. The CBA investments that we propose, that we are currently right now, and we have been since the beginning. Since I initially announced my support for this at the convention center, we've been working with council to make adjustments to the CBA, and we will continue to do that because that's what the legislative process, that's what it calls for. It calls for us to have conversations and to listen and to figure out how we can reach some much needed compromise. But there is one thing that I am committed to. I am not going to allow anyone to engage and divide and conquer amongst neighborhoods and communities in this city. A $1.3 billion economic opportunity in the city should benefit the entire city. This is not pitting one neighborhood against Chinatown. Or no, I will not tolerate that on my watch as mayor. But what I will affirm is, we said safe, clean, and green, and economic opportunity for all. And we're going to have to be able to measure the citywide impact. And if that's not what I'm working to ensure as your mayor, let me tell you something. I'm not doing any of us any service. Next up, we are going to hear from Rob DeBoe. Our finance director is going to walk us through the tax revenues, city, school district, local, so that you can see what the economic opportunity is. We're going to take questions. We have a team of people who are lined up, and they will come to you with cordless microphones, and I'm personally going to make sure that I stay for any questions that you have. I don't care if you're for or you're against. I want to hear what you have to say. Okay? Give a round of applause for our finance director, Rob DeBoe.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a little less energy than the mayor, but I'll walk you through these numbers. So we wanted to understand what this deal meant for the city. And one of the things we obviously wanted to look at was what it meant for our tax revenues. So to understand that, we hired a nationally known firm called CLS and asked them to do really as conservative a study as they could do. So we asked them to look at what new events would be created by this arena. We didn't assume any new revenue from the Sixers. So if the Sixers ticket prices go up, if they have a great season, if they have a horrible season, which could never happen, we didn't assume any other revenue from that. So their analysis was that we would get 53 new events, concerts, family shows, and other smaller events. And that would generate about $700 million for the city and the school district, so a substantial amount of money, and another $350 million for the state. So we also, though, on top of that, negotiated a pilot. The next slide. Move on to the next slide. So, just to repeat, this is a $1.3 billion investment with no city money. That has never happened before. But in addition to getting that investment with no city money, we're getting a pilot payment. And what a pilot payment is a payment in lieu of taxes. It is instead of real estate tax. But it's also, we wanted to make sure that that was going to get us the real estate tax we would have gotten in any event from the facility. So we looked at what we get, or what we would get from Wells Fargo. That would be smaller than the amount we're getting here. We looked at what we're getting from the area now, and that would be about 1/5 of what we're getting. So the pilot that we are getting starts at $5 million a year, and then it grows every 10 years. Another thing that had never happened in a pilot before. It averages about $6 million a year, which is equal to the combined amount that we got from the two stadiums down in South Philly, the Wells Fargo Center. So more than we've ever gotten from a pilot before, as much as the combined amounts from earlier pilots, and more than we'd be getting if they were paying property taxes. And that's, again, in addition to this historic investment. I'm now going to turn this over to Sam Rhodes to do some more comparisons to other facilities.
Thank you, Rob. My name is Sam Rhodes, and I work with PIDC. We've been working with the city on this project. And I wanted to spend a second to show this project in comparison to prior projects. You've probably heard a lot from us about how this is the best deal. We do not want you to just take that on surface value. We wanted to show you why it is the best deal. So we put together a little bit of a chart. And if you can go to the, okay, perfect. So if you look at the first 4 lines here, you can see that this project, as compared to the Wells Fargo Center, when it was constructed back in 1995, the Citizens Bank Park and Lincoln Financial Field, when they were developed, are approximately the same. In all cases, it is the team that was responsible for construction of those stadiums. It is the team that's responsible for operating the stadiums. In all cases, we were able to obligate the teams to play there for a 30-year term and have lease terms for 30 to up to almost 100 years. This is where it gets different. The first thing you'll notice in the project costs in the middle of this slide is inflation. So if you look in 1995, it cost about $229 million to construct the Wells Fargo Center. If you fast forward all the way to the right, you'll see it's $1.3 billion to build an arena of comparable size. That's what 30 years will do in terms of inflation. You look at the middle, Citizens Bank Park and Lincoln Financial Field, totally different kinds of facilities, but about $500 million each. So that's one thing you'll notice. Below that, you'll see where it really gets different. In the case of the Wells Fargo Center, the city owned the land already and contributed to that project. In addition, they put $32 million for the infrastructure and site preparation into that. In the case of the Phillies and the Eagles, you'll see that we put $303 million between the state and the city, and $314 million into the link and into Citizens Bank Park. In this project, and I know you've heard it before, but we just wanted to spell it out, there are no city funds going into this $1.3 billion investment. In addition to that, it's not just that upfront investment, but in addition, it's some of the other revenues that come with it. So down at the South Philadelphia Stadium complex, the parking revenues go to the teams. In this case, there are no revenues. Like the parking revenues will go to garage operators around the area, so the team doesn't have that. They do have various naming rights, and that will be part of the transaction. Let's move to the next slide. As a result of that major investment and no investment from the city, the tax revenues are substantially higher in this case. So you will see in the case of Citizens Bank Park and Lincoln Financial Field, the city had to borrow funds in order to make its investment. So as a result, those tax revenues, a large majority of them went towards paying back that debt. So you see the $89 million and the $28 million that went to the city and school district for Citizens Bank Park. You see the $70 million and the $41 million that the city gets net of the debt it has to pay for Lincoln Financial Field. In this case, because we have no debt, all of the tax revenues are coming to the city and school district of Philadelphia. $700 million combined, $555 million to the city of Philadelphia's general fund, $153 million over that 30-year play term to the school district. In addition to that, you've heard much probably about the community benefits agreement. So if you look within the red line here, you'll see that the Citizens Bank Park and Lincoln Financial Field, the Phillies and the Eagles did make various payments with respect to a services district in that area and to what we call a children's fund. In this case, we have $50 million from the developer of the Sixers, and that's on top of the fact that we're not paying any money towards it. In the case of the Phillies and the Eagles, the city made a contribution and then in return got some of these funds. In this case, we're not making any contribution, and we're still getting $50 million from the Sixers. And then in addition to that, you'll see the economic opportunity plan throughout. We've always had that. This one is a step above that in terms of the comprehensiveness, and you'll hear more about that later. So with that, I want to turn it over to, I just wanted to show that this really is the best project that we've ever gotten. It's arguably one of the best projects in this country. I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Planning and Development, Jesse Lawrence, to literally walk us down Market Street.
Good evening, everybody. I'll try to stroll down rather quickly, just for the sake of time. So this portion of the presentation presents the Mayor's Beyond the Basketball vision. It's a vision that was designed to leverage three varying but very interrelated pathways to economic opportunity. The vision, as you heard earlier, it taps into Market East's development potential, specifically to reactivate the corridor as a destination. It also includes economic opportunity plan as a requirement for the development. It also includes a $50 million community benefits agreement, as you heard earlier. Collectively, these three components focus on the expansion of opportunities for both workers and businesses. And looking at all three comprehensively, with building in ongoing monitoring and problem solving, the vision reflects the best in the nation practices. And it sets us up to meet and exceed participation goals as well. Next slide, please. So the first component of the Beyond the Basketball is the Market East development itself. It's the unprecedented chance for our city to unlock long-needed redevelopment along the historic corridor And and that was once the preeminent destination for not just our city, but the region as well. And as you can see on the next slide, on the next slide, the Beyond the Basketball approach looks at past, present, and planned redevelopment efforts that can be used to guide a master planning effort. As the mayor said earlier, you think about what the stretch used to be. It's the main street between Chinatown to the north and Washington Square West and Midtown Village to the south. You heard Memory Lane a second ago. It's where the Wanamaker's and the Woolworths and Strawbridge's, Gimbel's, where all of those iconic structures like the Litz building really were, and it really made that a destination some years ago. But now, today, despite what you see on the map, despite the future development in yellow, the investments along the corridor in blue, the hotels that surround the convention center, and the proximity to the Old City District on the right in that big square, Market East is not a destination anymore. And the red on the map highlights, along with the star toward the middle of the map, how the Sixers can really assemble those properties and really jumpstart development around the site and reclaim, Market East's destination status. Next slide. The next few slides move from west to east, as Sam mentioned, from City Hall to Penn's Landing, showing all the anchor opportunities that can be leveraged, such as investment like the Wanamaker's building where Macy's is now, a couple of recently completed residential towers to the south of Wanamaker's as well. But on the flip side, on the next slide, you have a whole host of empty storefronts, which can be activated once the arena development repositions Market Street as a destination, including the Wawa that used to be at 13th and Chestnut that closed its doors on the bottom left pick. In the next slide, as you even get closer to the convention center, you have a giant Marriott with golden doors that are closed to Market Street. You don't make doors gold to close them. And continuing east on the next slide, you'll see there have been attempts to redevelop a corridor where National Real Estate has completed a high-rise, multi-phased, mixed-use super block development that will complement the development of 1100, will also complement the development at 1100 Market Chestnut Street and other developments nearby. But once you move on to the next slide, you see how they couldn't really keep the tenants at the ground floor. Those are relatively newer developments, and they should have tenants at those empty spaces, but you have an empty, yet again, another Wawa, 12th Market. You have Target that used to be in the mid-block at 1100 Chestnut as well, but they couldn't hold on. Next slide. So this pretty much highlights the arena development proposal at the heart of Market Street. Again, it's the site that's at the center of a struggling corridor where the existing fashion district will be right-sized. The proposal is for 2 different phases on the north and south side of Market Street that will bring the arena, along with 54,000 square feet of retail, a total of 720 residential units, and 241 parking spaces. What the next slide shows is that you also have this development facing in a parking lot at 8th and Market that's been ripe for development for years and years. And on the following slide, you see the vacancy itself. That vacancy represents what's not just across the street from Market, from the fashion district, but you see the vacancy within the fashion district itself. Next slide. This particular slide shows some vacancy right by the fashion district, but it specifically calls out the emptiness at 8th and Market on the north side. Specifically picture number 5, where you once had Strawbridge's. That space, you also see some spaces where you have available signs to the north as you move toward Chinatown. It's also worth noting that there's a recent update to this particular slide because we now have vacancy where Giant Supermarket used to be for some years after it's relocating, actually vacating that space. It's not that, Giant doesn't want to be in Philadelphia, it just can't sustain itself along Market Street. Yet again, a tenant that couldn't hold on. Next slide. And as you get toward Independence Mall, you hit the old Litz building where there's been lots of investment. Brickstone's completed some renovation here, but half of it remains pretty vacant. However, it's still the headquarters of big companies like Five Below. And you also have some soft site interests to the south on the other side of the street, where development isn't planned, but it certainly can happen. Next slide. This next slide just shows again the Lids building, showing how vacant it is at the ground floor, where the Citizens Bank used to be. Right now, all you see is the Five Below entrance at the mid-block. Next slide. And once you get to the other side of the mall, you start to hit Old City. You do see some opportunities here as well, where the building at 5th and Market is seeing some upgrades. The buildings around the Weissman Museum are being repurposed and planning for conversions into some event venues and also some residential conversions as well, technically responding to the market. But if you move to the next slide, we end our journey in Old City, where they're paying a lot of attention to what's going on. They're looking to leverage the activity that is coming from not just Penn's Landing, but the CAP itself. It's basically become a focus on revamping the community itself, the historic and business district, thinking of ways to rebrand itself as a destination given its historic status. But worth really kind of looking at how it can, push a vision that looks at, bicycle safety, pedestrian corridors, better wayfinding, some additional event spaces. But what we can do is we can take a note from that book. We can look at how Old City is activating itself, and Market East being so close can definitely do the same. So next slide. I'll turn it over to our legal colleagues to talk about the economic opportunity.
I'm short, so. Good evening, everyone. Oh, that was dry. Good evening, everyone. So my colleague Jessie had the opportunity to talk about the vacancies that are along the Market East corridor. And so my speech today is going to be regarding how we're going to stimulate economic opportunity for our community. So I had the pleasure of working on the economic opportunity plan. And basically what that is a strategic framework designed to promote economic growth, access to opportunity, and inclusion for groups that have historically been disadvantaged. Our goal in this negotiation was to create long-term, sustainable economic development while focusing on growth that is inclusive of everyone that represents our community. And we focused on creating pathways for both individuals and businesses to engage in the economy, resulting in an improved standard of living. So that was our basis. So the EOP portion of this deal was critical in making sure that this deal has a positive impact beyond the basketball on our community. We utilized an approach leveraging industry experts to ensure that this plan was both ambitious but also obtainable. We studied our past, so the past arena deals such as the Wells Fargo Center, Citizens Bank Park, and we used those as a framework to set up a successful future. We spent time and effort to identify the areas of opportunity that we may have missed in the past and fill in those gaps going forward. And based on that, we've decided that this is the best EOP in history because of that approach. Next slide. So this EOP, like I stated, fills in gaps that were kind of areas of opportunity in the past. It's more comprehensive, meaning that we laid out more details and specifically within the plan, and then we thought through scenarios that were not explicitly included in past projects. The goals are ambitious, but they're also obtainable, and they either meet or exceed what was set in the past. Notably, it includes goals for operations and local residents, so that's inclusion from those parties. It also requires proactive measures to include meaningful opportunity for when diverse businesses and workers are included. So what that looks like within the plan is including roofing, HVAC servicing, electrical work, bonding, accounting, financial advising, concessionaires. It includes things like security, audiovisual production, landscaping, and so on. And so those are specific categories that they will be required to obtain or make a good faith effort to obtain inclusion from diverse businesses, women, and local workers. And then it also has ongoing reporting that will be in place for both construction and operations, which will be made available to the public because we want to be transparent throughout the process. Next slide. Okay, so the slide behind me is just the numbers of what were said so you guys can visually see what we talked about. For the construction phase, work phase, which is the green at the top, the goals were developed through all the goals were developed through a dual lens of both the current workforce demographics and what we predict them to be in the future. And that depended on already underway programs. We also have a demonstration of best and good faith efforts to meet the goals, and that names specific partners such as Philadelphia Works, the city's capital program office, Rebuild, the City College for Municipal Employment, and Everybody Builds. So we specifically laid out different programs that can be leveraged in order to obtain this inclusion. The next blue would be the construction phase contracting. This EOP specifies and anticipates contracting scopes and scopes of work that target different areas for capacity building. So for example, that's the landscaping. And then in the next, under phase 2, in that green, it goes over workforce diversity goals. They exceed prior EOPs. It also includes goals for local residents, so they will have to make a good faith effort to employ the residents like us. We live here, so they do have to make a good faith effort to include us. The goals run through all levels of the Sixers, so that talks management, that talks interns, that talks people directly and indirectly employed by the Sixers. And then for the last blue portion at the bottom, it includes a pipeline. We set these numbers based on a pipeline for diverse vendors and piloting programs that we believe they'll be able to obtain this participation. So with that, I will turn to my colleague to discuss the community benefits agreement.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tiffany Thurman, and I have the honor of serving as the Mayor's Chief of Staff. Before we get into the CBA, the Community Benefits Agreement, I want to acknowledge a group of people that are here tonight. And that's our beautiful, amazing young people that are over here on the side with their cameras. Can we all stand and give it up for them? Can you all stand to your feet and give it up for them? I want to let you know, on behalf of our mayor and our city, we see you, we appreciate you, we see you growing in your craft, doing your photography, and when we negotiated this deal, we were not in bed with the Sixers. We were not trying to make up or appease billionaires, as some of the false headlines have said. What we had in mind when we were working with the Sixers are these babies over here, and children all across our city, and what type of deal we wanted them to have. What type of experience we wanted them to have in Center City. What type of experience, what type of beyond, and that's what the mayor is talking about when she says beyond the basketball. Now there's been a lot that's been happening since we started here, and as the mayor says, we just got here January 1. And since January 1, we have been met with lies. We have been met with false truths or half-truths. And that's the reason why we're doing the town hall meetings, to say, don't just go by what you read in the paper, and the paper has its place. And don't go by just the sound bites that you see on television. And thank you to the news media that came tonight. The news media has its place. But we said, come out. We're going to come to your neighborhood. Come out. Hear directly from us. Hear about how we negotiated on behalf of you. And when we did that negotiation, it was led by our mayor, envisioned by our mayor, and we sat at that table. Myself, along of course with our entire team here on the front row. I said it last week and I'll double down on it tonight. You don't want to mess with us when it comes to fighting on behalf of the people. See, the mayor doesn't just come here and talk about food stamps and green books and growing up on government cheese just to get a round of applause and to move you. She's talking about her own, what she calls her own lived life experience. So when people put out false narratives about us being in the bed with the Sixers, how can you be in the bed with the Sixers when you are, here we go, here's our mayor now, when you grew up, right? When you grew up on public assistance, when you are first generation, okay? Because I am living my grandmother's wildest dreams, okay? I'm first generation generation college graduate. I, as they say, wasn't supposed to be here. The mayor, as they say, wasn't supposed to be here, but by the grace of God. Now, I'm not here to proselytize, but I would be doing my grandmother and the people that have taught me really well this service if I did not acknowledge him tonight. Now, furthermore, we're going to have a team of people that are going to come up here and talk to you about the community benefits agreement. But I just wanted to set some things straight. First of all, one of the biggest arguments that we've heard so far is you didn't do it with Chinatown. Well, I want to tell you all what happened. When first of all, the negotiation had been underway for over 2 years when we got here. And when we got here, the group said that was representing Chinatown did not want to negotiate with the Sixers. They did not want to negotiate a CBA. And what we said was then, we heard you. We know what your concerns are because we've met with you over the last 2 years. And based on those meetings that we had with you over the last 2 years, even though you don't want to come, you elected the mayor to serve on your behalf, to represent you. So we're going to sit at the table and represent you and talk about what your interests are. And so that's what we did. The next thing we heard was, well, people said, the community said, well, we didn't meet with them. Well, when we met with our city council members, and I see our city council member here, good to see you tonight, Councilmember Gaultier. When we sat before city council, who we are also accountable to, we talked about that engagement. We talked about how on June 1st, we met with them of 2023, June 2nd, July 23rd of 2023. And I just started with the 2023 dates. We were meeting with them in 22 as well, right? John Monlad, who was here under the previous administration. Am I right, Sam Rhodes, who was here under the previous administration? We met with them on July 14th of 2023, August 8th, 2023, October 1st, October 13th, January 26th of this year. Now, we had just gotten here. We're standing up a government, naming new people, working through the transition, but we understood how historic this deal was going to be. So what we said was we're going to prioritize that, and we met with the community in January 26th. Beyond that, we kept meeting with them throughout the months of February, March, April, May. I have the dates right here. I have the topics right here. June. We have been meeting with the community, the Chinatown community, and the community writ large from the very beginning. And what this deal represents is the outcome of those meetings. What are important, but not just for Chinatown, but the entire city. Because this deal is going to have community or citywide impact. So we wanted to make sure that this CBA represented the citywide impact, neighborhood by neighborhood, your neighborhood as well, and how you all could benefit from it. The next thing that has been said is that not only did we not meet with them, but that we don't care about black people. Now, what kind of disservice will we be making if we have the first black woman mayor in office and we forget where we came from? That is not the case. That is absolutely not the case. Not only does this deal represent African Americans, it actually represents all of the minority groups, right, that are represented in this city. And what we said was that no one was going to put us in a position of pitting one group against the other. But we were going to make sure that this entire agreement, which includes the CBA, was reflective of all the people in the city of Philadelphia. And that's what you're going to hear from our team this evening. You're going to hear about not just our EOP, which you've already heard about, our Economic Opportunity Plan, but as well as our Community Benefits Agreement and how it benefits all people. Now, I'm going to come back up here after they finish, but when you come up here, Sophie Bryan and anybody else that is scheduled to come up to talk about the CBA, I want you to put it in real terms about what this deal means for the people that have elected the mayor and the mayor who appointed us and who were called us to serve them on their behalf, how this represents them. Then I'll come back up and tell you some more mistruths that have been out there and the actual truth of what this deal really is.
Good evening, folks. Sophie Bryan, Chief Policy Officer. Next slide, please. So just to put this in real terms, one of the things that's different about this community benefits agreement is instead of having the money come $1 million a year over 30 years, it has a lot of the money coming up front. So I think we all in this room know $1 today is worth more than that same dollar 10 years from now. So what you'll see on this chart behind me is that fully 70% of that $50 million gets paid by the Sixers in the first 10 years. Now this links over to what the mayor and Tiffany have also both emphasized, making sure that those dollars help open opportunity for residents across the city, entrepreneurs across the city, to be part of both the arena project and that vision that Jesse cast for us of what could happen up and down East Market Street, bringing it back to what Market Street was when I was a kid growing up in Philadelphia. Next slide, please. This is a pie chart as of today, taking that $50 million and showing you all where are those dollars going to go. So as you'll see, and sorry for it's probably hard to see because it's tiny, but I'll narrate it, about 46%, so a little less than half of it, is going to citywide purposes. And what we mean by that, and we'll go through some details, those are programs and investments that could benefit folks in neighborhoods across the city. Just about 43% is specifically focused on Chinatown and the communities that are immediately adjacent to the arena. And then we've got about 11% right now, and this goes to Tiffany's and the mayor's remarks about working with city council, that are available for city council identified, directed investments. So Councilmember Gaudier is maybe news to you, but we've now sort of worked again based on feedback from you and your colleagues to identify some dollars that are available for redeployment in that CBA. So we've got 46% citywide, I hear you, 43% Chinatown adjacent, and 11% available for programming. Next slide, please. I'm going to start here with that Chinatown and adjacent communities part. And I want to say, as I'm going into that, y'all remember the mayor said earlier tonight, she is committed to Chinatown continuing to not just survive, but to thrive as the top Chinatown in the country. My colleagues John Monlack and Mike Carroll are going to come up after I finish and talk more about that broader Chinatown commitment, because I want no one to come out of this room tonight thinking that all that the Parker administration is doing for Chinatown is investing just this $23 million. It's a much bigger investment, a much wider commitment. But let's go through what's currently programmed for Chinatown. First and foremost is something called an Arena Services District. Put your hand up if you've been to a game down in the South Philadelphia Sports Stadium complex. An Eagles game, Sixers game, Flyers, Phillies. In that area of the city, there's something called a Sports Stadium Special Services District. And the whole idea there is that's a responsible group with a board representing community and elected officials that helps deal with things like traffic, like crowds, like public safety, like litter. One of the priorities of Councilmember Squilla, and the mayor talked about how this agreement has changed since it was first introduced, was to have something similar for the Sixers Arena on East Market. So that's why we've got this Arena Services District. It would be governed by a board that includes significant community representation, and I imagine Mike Carroll's going to talk about how that Arena Services District really works hand in glove with other city programs, other city approaches, with our friends at PPD's Traffic, with SEPTA, to make sure that the arena has a positive, not a negative impact on surrounding community. Next up is housing. So I imagine folks who have been following this in the news know we've heard from Chinatown that those cost pressures that we experience out here in West Philly, in terms of the rents always rising, it's never going down, that's also happening in Chinatown. As the mayor said, those pressures have been in place and they've been growing over decades. This is not something brand new. This is not because of the arena project. But the mayor is making a down payment in the CBA of $3 million in seed funding to support a range of city-funded programs to try to preserve affordability in Chinatown. And the mayor is very excited and has the pedal on the metal with our Department of Planning and Development lead, Jessie Lawrence, on her plan to create and preserve 30,000 units of housing. There will be a specific focus in that plan as well for Chinatown. A business disruption fund. Folks who ride the L, you guys know what happened to businesses up and down Market Street during that L reconstruction. It was, I saw, majority, leader here. It's not good. It was not good. The mayor has taken close note of what happened there and is committed to doing something different with the Chinatown Arena. So
this is chop change.
the dollars in there. The dollars in there.
There's going to be a time. This is not a yes crowd, and we don't expect for everybody to come in here and say, good job, man. We said whether you agreed or not, you can come in and you can ask questions. But we will do things decently and in order. Now Sophie's going to finish her part, and we're going to finish the rest of this. And then we're going to stay here as long as you need us, okay? Because we ain't got nothing else to do or go to after this but the bed. So we will stay as long as you need to hear us, and you can talk to us and share your concerns. There was a group that came to my office just the other day. I'm going to another meeting. They're outside of my office with their cameras and their videos, and they wanted to ask questions. And I'm fine with the questions. I have no problem with the questions. But things will be done in decency and in order. You don't have to agree, and if you cannot do it in decency and in order, you will be asked to leave. So we have a few more slides to go, and after that, we will continue.
Yes, excuse me. We're going to take as long as we need to take, no matter how long it takes, and we're going to stay here until we answer every question that you have, but you have to allow my team to get through this presentation, and you don't have a right to disrupt the meeting. I don't care where you are, if you are for the arena or you're against the arena. We're not leaving until every question that you have is answered, and you have a right to your perspective. I'm sorry, Sophie, I apologize.
All right, business disruption front, Market Street. We're not going to repeat the mistakes of the past, just like Nicole said with the EOP. So this is grant funding for small businesses that are facing any kind of disruption from arena construction and operations. Neighborhood security substation. Idea here is we've got PPD, we've got SEPTA, we've got Center City District, we've got Jefferson, all with teams that are helping to preserve public safety and orderly environment, particularly when events are dismissing. This will be a physical location that the Sixers will pay for to help coordinate that policing response and that public safety response. Next slide, please. Additional items in Chinatown. Cleanliness, an issue that came up directly from community. Tiffany ran through those roster of meetings that the city team has had with Chinatown. One of the concerns for sure is trash and litter due to additional traffic from the arena. So taking an existing program run by a local community group and expanding it. And then last on this slide, Councilmember Gaudier, I always think of you when we talk about master planning, investments for master planning, so working with community to figure out the long-term vision, both for Chinatown and for Market East, with a significant investment from the CBA. Next slide, I'm going to get to the citywide investments. So as Tiffany said, as the mayor said, these are the investments that should benefit folks across the city of Philadelphia. First and foremost, and this ties to Tiffany's shout out to our young photographers across the way, $7 million for support of the extended day, extended year schooling. Launched this fall, is in city district-run schools and charter schools, and is really focused on providing young people both additional educational opportunities and enrichment opportunities to put them on the pathway to one day be running, say, the Sixers arena or running the Sixers. I see my friend and colleague Carol DeFries in front of us here with City College Municipal Employment, an investment there to both build a pipeline to those good paying, good benefits city jobs for our graduates of SDP, for our current city team members who can level up with additional credentials, for folks who are disconnected from the workforce currently. Here, there's really going to be a focus on preparing both workforce and businesses to connect to the arena opportunities and that development on East Market Street. Business readiness program, still in the theme of getting folks ready to leverage an opportunity, working with our diverse chambers, African American Chamber, Greater Hispanic Chamber, Asian American Chamber, and Independence Business Alliance to work with their constituents, their members, to get them ready to access the opportunity that Nicole outlined is going to be provided for with this agreement. And then last slide on citywide, really, really important. This has been a huge topic of conversation in City Council. For this urban site to work, we've got to have folks taking public transit to those games and more importantly, home from those games. So one of the investments from the CPA is $3 million to support tickets for event attendees to take SEPTA home after games in the early years of arena opening. And then a couple more things focused on business and one final one on young folks. Power Up Your Business and Business Barriers Fund, again, both focused on getting businesses ready to take advantage of the economic opportunity, and particularly businesses that have not historically had opportunity for these kinds of contracts, for these kinds of engagements. The mayor talks a lot about the Business Barriers Fund. These are the sort of small things that can really stand in the way. Do you have audited financials? Do you have bonding? Do you have the right kind of insurance? And the mayor's commitment here is to make sure that those kinds of small compliance issues don't get in the way of local businesses. Taking advantage of having a kiosk opportunity right there in the 76th Place Arena. And then finally, and near and dear to the mayor's heart, is internship and employment onboarding for high school students and college students particularly focusing on our local HBCUs, Lincoln and Cheney, for front of house roles and back of house roles. And Nicole mentioned, and it was on that slide, which had a lot of numbers, there's a particular internship line item there in that EOP with the 6 years committed. I think it's 40% of internships going to local residents. Next slide here, this is just that final sort of still to be determined by, in conjunction with City Council allocation. And I'm going to ask my colleague Renee Garcia, City Solicitor, to take us through some of the details of how this transaction is structured.
Solicitor, stay right up here. Because this is the woman this is who we went to. You know, when the mayor talks about being at war with the status quo, you know, I was honored to stand alongside or to sit alongside of in those meetings, our city solicitor, on behalf of our mayor, to tell the Sixers what our line in the sand was. So it was not about getting to yes. It was about ensuring that this deal really was the best and most historic deal in this history. But we didn't just say that to say that. We didn't come up with that. We didn't come up with a deal and said, yes, this is historic. We had a third-party, independent organization, a consulting firm actually, that does this for a living. And that has negotiated or been a part of negotiations or has analyzed the economic impact of negotiations both nationally and internationally. And based on their assessment, I don't know why I'm holding you so tight. Based on their assessment of this deal, it was their findings. They then concluded, not just with our CBA, but the entire structure of the deal, that this was a historic deal, not just for the city of Philadelphia, but for deals like this overall in our nation. And so when we look at things like both the CBA and the overall deal, and you compare that to what Sam had earlier, the chart that Sam had earlier, you'll see oftentimes when you hear about this deal in light of other deals or similar deals in the city of Philadelphia, they're comparing 3 arenas, which we see down in the city in South Philly, to this one deal, and there's no comparison. This one deal, this CBA and this one deal is $50 million, not $30 million across 3 deals. And so it was their findings that said, this is the best deal, this is the right deal, and this is a historic deal. It is important that I say that. Now, as we talk about the transaction and enforceability of the deal, which I think is really, really important for you all to hear, which our solicitor is going to talk about in just a moment, I want to let you know that when we sat down at that table, at those big law firms with Goliath, right? When we sat down at that table, we said, you know, give us 3 smooth stones and a slingshot. And as those of you who know, you know. And that's what we did. We went to war with really nothing. We didn't come saying that, you know, with handouts. We didn't come saying we're going to just give you a blank checkbook. What we said is that we're going to negotiate this on behalf of the people. So traditionally, in a CBA, you will have sort of a right-sized triangle where the majority of the funds, the majority of this $50 million wasn't going to be allocated until the back end. That's how these deals are structured. We said absolutely not. We're going to flip that triangle upside down. And the majority of this funding, you're going to give to the people in this city up front. And that's what Sophie was talking about. And so it was those nuances that really took a lot of negotiating and going back and forth, but us holding the line to say, no, we're going to do what's right on behalf of Chinatown, but also our entire city. So now we'll talk about enforceability of the CBA, but it was important that you heard that.
Thank you, Tiffany. We didn't have much, but we had a nickel and a quarter right there. And I see the camera going over here. I know the young people are going to delete all the bad pictures of me, right? You said no. I'm going to check your camera. So I am the city solicitor, Renee Garcia, and I'm counsel to both the mayor's administration and city council. And you might have seen that come up in the testimony that came today. My job is to oversee all of the legal documents, and there are hundreds and hundreds of pages. And in the end, the big sublease is what I have to sign. So it is my job to make sure that the city's rights are protected and that the city's rights are enforceable. And I want to drill down on something the mayor said earlier today on the CBA. So normally CBA would be between the community and a developer, but what we saw were weaknesses in other cities. And we saw that litigation because there wasn't a successor clause in the CBA, which means when the team is sold, that CBA stays in force, owner to owner to owner to owner. And those community members who didn't get paid, right, who budgeted for that money and then got the rug pulled out, they had to lawyer. It was on their shoulders. And we're not going to let that happen here. We're not putting it on our community's shoulders, right? That enforcement comes from my office because I've got an army of people, right? We're also having the funds go through the city. So they make a payment and then our finance department gives out the money. So we know exactly where the dollars are going. We know they're going on time and all of that is reported publicly. Happy to answer more questions about, but that's really, really important because we know that this is important to all of you, that the money gets to where it's supposed to go on time. We know how budgeting is hard for nonprofits. I'm going to talk now about the structure of the deal. It is quite legally complex, as I said, hundreds and hundreds of pages. Many of the agreements were posted online on September the 25th. I think there's a QR code at the end of this presentation so that you can read them for yourselves. I'm going to give you an overview today, but I want you to have the facts because there's a lot of misconceptions out there. There are 11 ordinances and resolutions that are before City Council. Councilmember Squilla put them in on October the 24th, and we have been in public hearings for the last several weeks. Assuming passage, demolition is slated to start in 2026, construction in 2028, and the arena will open in 2031. In general, the structure is very similar to that of the Phillies, the Eagles, and Wells Fargo centers, which I will explain. But essentially, the city will own the property through its authority. That's the Philadelphia Authority for Industrial Development. It's called PAID. And it leases back to the Sixers. Next slide, please. Yes, that's the correct one. Okay, you might have seen a lot of maps on social media about where this arena is going to go. So again, I want you to have the facts so that you can make up your own mind. And looking at this slide, you'll see the 3 green boxes. That's the current Fashion District Mall. 2/3 of the mall will remain. However, what you see in the black line, that third of the mall will become the arena, along with the red parcel, which is the old Greyhound. The purple line there is Filbert Street, which will still have an underpass. You can cross under Filbert Street. And then there's a tiny section of air rights there on the 10th Street Bridge. All of that gets wrapped together in the arena parcel. So you can see it doesn't even reach up to Arch Street there. All of that will be combined. The Sixers will build the arena. Everything goes to the city and gets leased back to the Sixers in that big sublease that I was talking about. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view here from the east. Again, I want you to see where the arena is going to be because there's a lot of misinformation about it up there. You can see Marketplace in the yellow, and there you see the arena in the red. Chinatown north of the arena, and you can see the convention center. You can see City Hall in the top left corner. So I hope that gives you a sense so you can see for yourself. The mayor's a visual learner, I'm a visual learner. But I hope that this helps you to really see what we're talking about and fit within what Jesse Lawrence talked about before when we're talking about beyond the basketball. Thank you. Next you will hear from John Monlock. Thank you so much.
Anybody want to come back for this one? Good evening. My name is John Mondlak. I'm with the Department of Planning and Development, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Chinatown. So we have a two-pronged approach when it comes to Chinatown. The first is they're already experiencing issues right now. They're experiencing challenges around parking and traffic and affordability and cultural preservation and things like that, safety and cleanliness. And so we need to address the existing challenges, but we also need to be sensitive to any impacts that this arena could bring to this community. And you saw some maps, and I just want to explain why are we talking about Chinatown. So the arena is proposed to be on Market Street. The neighborhood immediately to the south is Wash West. The neighborhood, Midtown Village, is directly south and a little bit west. Society Hill and Old City are also very close. But Chinatown is in the unique position where they sit between the arena and a number of parking lots on Filbert Street, and there's plenty of parking garages that exist today, and they're all empty at night, and the highway. And so Chinatown, that's where they sit, and that's why we're trying to be very sensitive to their needs. Now again, we have an administration that is very focused on trying to preserve the cultural identity of this community because it is the best Chinatown in the country without a doubt. And we all feel we're all unified in that. And so we need to work with residents and community members and businesses and try to figure out how best to address their concerns. The concerns that they've shared with us and the concerns that they may share with us in the future. Councilman Squilla, the district council person for this district where the arena is proposed, has already introduced 2 bills, and he's talking about putting a 3rd bill together to be introduced. The existing bills that went in, that are not law yet, but they're proposed, one is an overlay that addresses a number of things in Chinatown. It adds a required affordability for residential projects. It puts a limit of 65 feet on all buildings that are not pre-existing. If your building's there, then that's fine. But new buildings have to be limited to 65 feet to try to preserve the character of the neighborhood. It also prohibits uses around smoking lounges, assembly and entertainment, adult-oriented uses. So they would be prohibited going forward for new businesses. It would not put anybody out of business that already has an existing business. And it limits the size of businesses to 3,000 square foot, again, in keeping with the character of the community. The second bill that he has put in is also a bill that was mentioned earlier, the Arena Services District. Again, we learned a lot of lessons from South Philly, what works. And what works is having an organization that is a key gel to coordinate with everybody that has an interest in this area and work with the community and be a direct pipeline to address concerns, issues, ongoing, be responsive, and so he created a bill to do exactly that. And again, this area has a number of things going on. I mentioned Chinatown. They have lots of restaurants, they have evening events, but there's also the convention center nearby. Mostly daytime events, but they also have evening events. And then very close to it is the Reading Terminal Market, which again, mostly daytime, but they do have quite a few evening events. And so it's really important to coordinate with all these entities to make sure that there's as little overlap as possible, and when there is overlap, that it's dealt with in an appropriate manner using the best information available. The other bill that Councilman is thinking about introducing or working on is a tax incremental financing bill that deals with cultural preservation. The idea is that if Chinatown experiences growth beyond the growth of the city, meaning accelerated growth because there's so much economic activity and it threatens the ability for people to afford their business rents and their residential, that it would capture the excess growth and try to put that back into the community. So that's being worked on in addition to everything else that's being mentioned. Now again, we need to preserve the vitality of Chinatown. We're looking at the CBA, which allocates $14+ million to the Arena District. We need to listen to the community, and we've already met with the community. We know a lot of their concerns. We have heard that our department routinely reaches out to every community, but we also need to make sure that they're engaged, because as things arise, as new things come up, we need to be sensitive to that, and we need to be listening to their ideas, because it's their ideas that need to be implemented. And that's the whole point of the master plan, is to implement the things that the community wants. And it's not the only thing that's happening in this region. There are other projects. We need to make sure that we're coordinating all these projects together. There's a stitch that caps 676. That's a $163 million project funded by the federal government. That has a planning component. We need to coordinate and make sure that we are getting all the same information for that project that coordinates with everything else, so that we do everything we can to ensure that these go off without a hitch. There's also the Reading Viaduct. It's a long viaduct that's been abandoned for many decades. It can be turned into, we already turned a little piece into a public park, and we're looking to turn a much bigger piece into a public park. And again, that's already something that's in the works that needs to be addressed and coordinated with the growth in Chinatown. And we need to look at municipal property and make sure we understand what we have and what it's used for. We need to be sensitive to Chinatown's needs. Again, they've told us they need more recreational space in the cultural center, and we need to work with them to make those a real thing. Small business support was mentioned, $1.6 million. Mike will talk about how important it is to not have disruption, but if there is, and there probably will be, we have a fund to help businesses that are disrupted. The services district, in addition to dealing with cleanliness and traffic and coordination, there can also be a support for the businesses, technical support or just informational support. We need to evaluate everything about Chinatown that we can help with, whether it's branding, whether it's signage, anything to get more people into Chinatown is critically important for their success, and we need to be sensitive to that. We need to make sure that we're looking at ways to make sure property, both business and residential, is affordable. And we need to address parking and traffic, as Chinatown is already a car-driven community, because the other Asian communities outside of the city are definitely car-oriented. That's who they are competing with, and we're very aware of that. Again, it was mentioned that there's money for affordable housing. There's $3 million seed money that we will use to provide affordable housing support for rental assistance to senior housing. And as Sophie mentioned, the mayor's working on a much bigger plan that will have a focus on Chinatown. And as I said, one of the things that they're struggling with right now is cleanliness. We want to make sure that that does not get worse, and so there's an extra $1.25 million for Clean and Green through PHL, TCB. We know that the Arena Special Services District will be focused on cleanliness and managing that, and we need to evaluate other things like trash pickup to make sure we're responsive, and then to look at improvements to the physical nature of the land, to see if we could add hard landscaping, add planters, add benches, add things to make the community more vibrant, and again, with the whole goal of trying to increase traffic and help them be as successful as they can be. And next up, Mike Carroll's going to talk about traffic and parking.
Okay, thank you all. So I'm going to close us out on the slide deck, and then we can get to questions. I will try and keep it as concise as I can, but I do want to reflect back on what the mayor laid out in terms of our vision, because I think it's important to keep that in mind. And the main idea here is to reactivate a section of Market Street, to bring people and activity to a part of downtown which has kind of been dead but needs to come back to life. The challenge is to do that in a way where you're not imposing significant impacts on the surrounding communities. And that's why, as she said and others have said, we focus too much on Chinatown, but not just Chinatown. As others have said before, we're also looking at Washington Square West, Midtown Village, Old City, all of the residential communities, all of the small business communities that are in the same area. So the commitment's there, and in order to meet that commitment, we have set aside some resources, so specifically this $3 million in the CBA, in order to try and think about how to promote people using alternative modes of transportation. So the traffic right off the gate is the first thing people think about. Like John said, we've got parking garages which are located in an area where people can foresee there's a lot of traffic going through Chinatown to get to those parking garages. In general, we've heard a lot of concern that people would try and park in Chinatown on the street and then go to the arena and take up parking that they need for their own community. either because they live there or their businesses are run there. So I just want to be real clear about that last point. That is not going to happen. That is not going to happen. PPA is primed and ready to go. And we will look at the parking conditions, we will look at the parking restrictions and regulations, and we will tailor them in conversations with the Arena Services District, in conversations with people who run businesses in Chinatown and in these other communities to make sure that those parking regulations do not allow for someone to park for the duration of time it would take to get to the arena, to watch an event, and then to get back to their car. And, you know, I've said it before, if you go back to that spot, your car isn't going to be there. And PPA will be happy to not just have you pay the ticket, but to have you pay to get your car out of impound, if that's the kind of decision that you think you're going to be making. So what we're looking at in general is how we can piece together all the strategies we can so we have a robust environment where people can come and not create impacts, whether it's parking, whether it's the traffic of coming and going. A key thing that people have to keep in mind is that traffic condition is going to be most intense after the event, when everybody lets out and they go where we're going. That's what we see in the stadium district. That's what we see when the convention lets out big events. That's what we see whenever there's something, people come and watch. When it's over, everybody kind of goes, gets to their car and they leave. That's not going to happen in a time when we're seeing the normal rush hours. It's not going to be in the morning rush. It's not going to be at lunchtime. It's not going to be at the end of the day. It's going to be after 9:30. If it's a Sixers game, it's probably going to be a half hour from that to get to your car, whether it's parked in a garage or you're going to have to take a short ride on the L or the Broad Street subline to get to your car. And so that traffic's going to start up around 10 p.m. We're going to have uniformed officers in the area managing traffic on the ground, and they can see what's going on and they control the traffic. We're going to make sure we do everything we can to facilitate conversations between the Sixers and SEPTA so that the transit capacity is there, that we're promoting transit use. We want people to use both the subway, the L, and regional rail system. And so some work is going to be put into making sure that those regional rail cars are going to be there. And that's a conversation that's going, but we're supporting that conversation as much as we can. And we want to make sure that we can subsidize actual tickets. And we want the Sixers to do as much as they can to subsidize tickets and to promote that use. At the end of the day, we're probably looking at about 2,000 cars that are going to be letting out between 10 p.m. and midnight. Now, that's not nothing, but the street network in this area is abundantly large enough to handle that traffic. There's going to be improvements required in the traffic impact study, required by the Streets Department, required by PennDOT, so that those signals are upgraded, they're all integrated into the system, they're monitored constantly, and we can make real-time changes in the operation in order to make that smooth as possible. So this work is already ongoing, but the thing we have to also keep in mind is this Arena Services District is going to have an opportunity to manage in real time and manage year to year from the day that the arena opens throughout the 30 years. That services district will be majority run by people who work and live in the area. And that area extends from A Street to Broad Street, from Spring Garden to South Street. So people have a direct commitment to their neighbors, to the businesses that they patronize, to make sure we're always updating the plan. We don't just do a plan and walk away and assume it's going to work perfectly. We're keeping it live and we're keeping it relevant every year, every game, every concert. So that Arena Services District has a really interesting role. If we go to the next slide, actually this is the right slide, and it gets started right away. It doesn't wait until 2031. They start their planning work right away. And the first thing they're going to look at is the construction impacts. And John mentioned there's this funding that's set aside in order to make sure that businesses are made whole if they see that there's issues that the construction causes for them. And part of what we're responsible for as the Streets Department, as a city, is to make sure that that's as minimal as possible. So we're not going to allow that construction to shut down streets. You may have a delivery, you may have a street you have to close for half a day, but you're not going to see week-long closures and month-long closures where traffic is permanently detoured. You need to get in with your stuff, get in with your equipment, set it up, do your work, and get out. Most of this footprint is large enough so that that construction can happen on the site itself, and that's our expectation. And we're going to require the Sixers to present a plan, what we call maintenance and protection of traffic plan. It ensures that the ongoing neighborhood routine business, activities, people going to appointments are not disrupted by this construction. That's their obligation. And if they can't come up with it the first time, we're going to not give them the permits to do any closures, and they're going to need to come back and show us something that works. They understand that. They've signed up to that commitment, and when they get their building permits, that building permit will be conditioned on them living up to that. And if they can't live up to that, their construction will be shut down. We do that. We do that all the time. But they don't want that because they're trying to meet a schedule. So they'll have to bring in the expertise from professionals who do this type of construction to make sure that they have that plan. And they're going to have to submit that plan to the Arena Services District, who will have to sign off on it. Again, majority run by people who live and work in this area. We're also understanding that the quality of life issues are not limited to parking and traffic, and that there's a lot of concern about public safety. Again, these are the tools that we think will help us solve that problem. We will be investing in the construction of a new substation for the police. That will be a point of contact for Philadelphia Police, SEPTA Police, staff who work with the Center City District, security for Jefferson Hospital. The Arena Services District will have an input in terms of making sure that they're in real-time coordination with those people, and there will be planning that's ongoing to make sure that where there's problems, that's communicated immediately to the police and other responsible city departments to address them. The Arena Services District will be resourced so that they can actually do programming, but also provide services directly. And that'll include cleaning, it'll include maintenance, it'll include the beautification that people really expect in an area that we're trying to revitalize. So all in all, I feel like these tools are in place to make sure that people who have expressed concerns, whether they're in favor of the arena, whether they've been opposed, whether they're coming around, have a real voice in how this is operating in real time. It's something that will not just be put away and walked away from, but it's going to represent a living commitment to make sure that, as the mayor says, we're doing everything we can to listen to people and implement what they need to see in this corridor. Thank you.
So can y'all give the team a round of applause? Listen, you know what, I'm going to share this with you quickly, and I want the team, I know our team is going to get ready because they have microphones and there are people who have questions, and I meant what I said. We are going to stay to answer all of your questions. But there's something about being patient and getting all the facts and the information. So that any questions that you may have, you can get them answered, but somebody else may not know something that you already know. So who am I to not be patient enough to listen to everything, because you know everything. Commissioner Stanford, so when you say, well, you don't have to go through all of that. I know all of that. Get to what I want to get to. Good, right that way. Y'all all right? We ready? Okay, question. Where? We got a question? Okay, yes, over here. Yes, sir.
As a student, what is my pathway to getting a job, being successful, and making money?
Oh. He said as a student, his pathways. Can you take the debt back to CCME? That is, what's your name?
Samir.
Say it again.
Samir.
Samir? An amazing name. Two things that we talk about in this proposal. One, it is definitely the school district portion of the taxes that will be collected that will go directly to the school district. But there are two vehicles. One is extended day and extended year. That's $7 million. Something that we developed this year. Why? Because we looked at what young people in some of our suburban districts and the surrounding community had access to. And they had access to, let me give you a quick one. How many of you all remember a game called Pac-Man or Miss Pac-Man? I played that game game growing up, and it was, you understood it, quarter in, eat the dots, clean the board, it all made sense. They play a new kind of game now. Young people, I don't know, have you ever heard of roadblocks? Well, my son, I have a son, he's 12. So why he loves this Roblox. He wants to play Roblox all the time. I'm talking to his teacher, what do we need to do? Guess what she said to me, Samir? She said, well, instead of being concerned about Langston playing Roblox, she said, why don't you get him into a program where he can learn how to code and create his own video game? I'm a dinosaur, I wasn't thinking about it, didn't know what coding was, hadn't talked to Sylvester Mobley, Ryan Boy, I didn't know what coding was about. But Samir, that's what that pot is for, to try to give our young people, listen, and not just traditional publics, and we pitting charter schools against tradition, they're all of our children. So that's what the extended day, extended year. And then there's this CCME, City College for Municipal Employment. You come through the school district, through one of our traditional publics or charter schools, and you decide, you know what, I want to go and be a part of the building trades. I want to be a carpenter. I want to be an electrician, an operating engineer, a steam fitter, you know, a plumber. We want you to have a vehicle. And so all of the apprenticeship programs that everybody builds, programs that are working through CCME with our partners, we want you to have a vehicle to get there. So in every way imaginable for us, we've tried to use this as an opportunity. And Tiffany said it beautifully, that when we were at the table, we were thinking about you. We were thinking about you when we were at the table. So that's what's included, and thank you for the question. I appreciate you. Yes, okay, okay. Yes, you can. They're going to bring a microphone to you. Somebody has a microphone?
Speak very loud here.
Okay. And then we're going to come over here, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Hassan Bella.
I want to know what SEPTA. Nobody said a word about SEPTA.
This gentleman's here been waiting, and we're going to come straight to you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Hassan Bella, and I'm from the Philadelphia Marshall, CBC. And we had several questions for you, and you really answered them. They were about the economic impact of our community for construction jobs, for procurement, for professional services. And so since you answered that question, we just want to say thank you for being who you are and for what you do for the team to help us.
Thank you so very much. We appreciate you, and thank you for being engaged. We appreciate it. And this young lady has a question about septic.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, thank you for the presentation. We've met. I'm Ellie Larson. I live in the neighborhood. I'm super concerned about SEPTA. They just had an increase. They're cutting services. They're on a death spiral. And we haven't heard a word about what will happen to SEPTA or what the Sixers will do, although we know they don't want to do much. And I don't know how people are going to get to those wonderful jobs if there is no SEPTA. Magali Larson. Yes, Larson.
First, before we get into Arena and SEPTA, because I love what you just affirmed, and our speaker, Joanna McClinton, she was here and she had to go out. But let's give a shout out to our Governor Josh Shapiro and our speaker, Joanna McClinton, for 158, 153, 154, what was it? $153 million flex lifeline that Governor Shapiro provided to mass transit. But while you all saw a whole lot of that, I don't want you to forget. And Representative Krajewski, you are here, I think you're the only rep left. Super excited about. And Rep. Alvin Brown, good to see you. Give up Rep. Alvin Brown, he just arrived, I didn't acknowledge you. I'm sorry, thank you, Rep, for being here. When you all give a round of applause to them, I want you to remember what you've done already. Your tax dollars. They had 3 pieces of legislation provide a dedicated revenue source and funding for SEPTA. 3 times it passed the House. Now, every time this legislation passed, it would require an additional local share. Philadelphia, Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Mount Hope, all of the regional counties where we have ridership with SEPTA, their local share would have to increase. Rob DeVoe, what was our local share increase? We went up to 133 million, 133 million. So listen, while we didn't have the, what you said was Councilwoman, 153, we didn't do a $153 million flex, but we did $133 million in Philadelphia, increased its local share in funding to SEPTA. So I need you to know in advance of what you already have done. And Mike Carl, because we need to answer that question specifically about the capital improvements and then operations.
So Mike is going to go into great detail about what's happening with SEPTA. But one thing that we've been doing town hall, we do town halls often. Our first town hall was last week in Northwest, and now this is our second town hall. And when I got home that night, I was up half the night and I was kicking myself because there was one very important fact that we did not get out there last night, or last week rather, and we haven't really talked about a lot on the record that is very important for you all to hear. So when we were at the church last week in Mount Airy, presenting at Mount Airy Church of God in Christ, presenting on this deal, and Mike answered every question, both for people who had concerns about SEPTA, who were in favor of this deal, not in favor of this deal. We answered the questions, we stayed behind, but the one thing that we didn't get on the record is this. We set the table. SEPTA and Sixers had been doing what they've been doing, and we wanted to make sure that there was not one side playing against the other, because SEPTA has real problems, right, in terms of from a financial perspective, right? And the one thing that we kept hearing ongoing, they're on a death spiral, they're on a death spiral, they're on a death spiral. And yes, they do have real financial issues, but what we did not want people to do was to conflate a bigger issue with this deal, right? And so what we did was we said, we wanted to be in the room at the table as they were negotiating. And that's what we've done. We've set the table, we have brought them together, and they are in active negotiations with one another. And if they were here tonight, and actually they said this, both entities, both SEPTA, their chief of staff, Liz Smith, and then David Gould, today on the record and last week said that they're in active negotiations with one another. So we have a lot of people advocating for saying that we're not thinking about SEPTA when we're the ones who set the table and made sure that SEPTA and the Sixers are working together to ensure that this is the best deal and that this does not lead to, this one deal does not, as important as it is, does not lead to the death of SEPTA. And furthermore, not on our watch. Not on our watch. Not a mayor who has been advocating for SEPTA long before this deal came from the table, or over a decade ago, been advocating for funding for SEPTA. And so it was really important, though, that we got that on the record, that we have set the table and we are at the table and we will continue to work with both SEPTA and the Sixers. Now that's overall broad strokes. Mike Carroll is now going to go into great detail, ma'am, to answer your questions around SEPTA. So here we are.